Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, today I have Jazz McCann here to discuss his book, 6,000 Days. So, Jazz, tell me a little bit about this book. I have read it and I'm absolutely fascinated.
Well, thanks very much for having me. First of all, Sean, people keep asking me, why did you write this book? There's a number of reasons. First of all, there's a great interest out there. I've been asked quite a number of times, what was it really like in the H blocks during that particular period? And of course, that particular period in the late 70s and the early 80s, it is historic. It is the catalyst for today's rise of Sinn Féin. And of course, like many blanket men, I owe a lot to the 10 hunger strikers in particular. And of course, Joe McDonald gets a good mention in it because I feel very strongly I feel very much in his debt. He was a source of strength to many of us in the D-Wing and H5. And I wanted to tell a story. And it's a story which probably be typical of other hunger strikers as well. Just an ordinary guy, just caught up in particular circumstances, made choices, stood up when people needed to be counted, and showed leadership. And today, as you know, he's part of history. But I wanted people just to get to know him. And I also feel strong about Sean McKenna as well. I wanted people to understand about Sean McKenna, what a great Republican he was. Sean McKenna, I would class as the 11th hunger striker. He basically died on the first hunger strike because they had to bring him back to life. So therefore he was prepared to die. And Sean, took his own life, actually, on the anniversary of the hunger strike some years later. And he's another person who I personally feel I owe a debt, and therefore I wanted to give him a mention too, to let people know the sort of character that Sean McKenna was, the great Republican, the Republican icon that Sean McKenna was. And you know, as I said already, a lot of people have been asking me, what was it like in the H block? So hopefully this gets you right in there. Hopefully the reader, when lifting this book and getting into this book, they'll get a sense of what it was really like to be locked up 24/7 and to endure the excesses of a prison regime intent on breaking us, and as well were allowed a free run. And that has to be highlighted too, the abuses which we suffered, and there was nothing done about it. Nothing done about it. You know, and you sit back and you realize today is, you know, litigation today, when things happened and there's court cases and so on. Basically, we just took it on the chin. It was a case of Republicans don't recognize courts and administrations and so on. And that was the attitude. It did change. It changed late in the day. I think it was about, it must have been about 79, late 79, 80, when things did change. I remember particularly bad beating in the wing. And the OC said, go out and get it recorded and ask for a solicitor, which we did. We got out, and by the way, we were reluctant, obviously, to list all our injuries. We did get some listed. So we had the body charts there, we had the evidence of the brutality, and we got solicitors up and so on. And that did help to bring a change. Now, it didn't end the beatings, but it certainly helped to bring a change. And possibly we had been doing that from day one. While things would have been difficult, obviously, it may have helped. But it was a brutal regime. A lot of men, very badly beaten. And there's still, I would say, still quite a lot of ex-blanket men would still suffer trauma from that period. And while we're all very proud being part of that period, as I've said, it was part of history. There's still that feeling, of, it should never have been allowed to happen. Never been allowed to happen. And I mean, and in fairness, and in fairness to prison officers, they were put on the front line as well. Now, some of them reveled in it. And I would say particularly those prison officers who work clearly in the blanket wings, and possibly, that's where they wanted to be, where they could get a free run. But I'd also say that there were some prison officers who just wanted to do their job under very difficult circumstances and were caught up in a culture of all I can describe as hatred. And if they were to stand up against this, it would have to be very, very strong. Because the culture was, they're vermin, they're, all the name calling was there. And I've already explained about being brutalized by them. And if a prison officer didn't participate, or worse, spoke out against that, they would be ostracized by other prison officers. Prison officers tend just to socialize in the camp. In the camp, there was a social club. So they tended just to socialize in the camp and their social club. And of course, then if they spoke out against anything or didn't participate in anything, then they'd be ostracized. It was a very strong POA there, led by a particular number of prison officers who were renowned for their brutality. And they would have led the charge against those prison officers who didn't participate. So what I'm saying is, in that hate-filled atmosphere, if a prison officer didn't participate, he would have to be very, very strong. There was some evidence of that, very little, but there was some evidence of that. And any prison officer who showed any sort of humanity, I had nothing respect for him, because I realized how much things were against them doing that in that environment. But that was the exception. The culture was get into them, break them, and as I said, it was very, very extreme. Anything they could mess about with, they did it, whether it be banging doors at night, leaving lights on, turning heating off, messing about with the food, hosing the cells, and of course the beatings as well. All that took place on a daily basis. And then we had, of course, the dreaded wing shifts, where every 10 days to 2 weeks were moved from one wing to another. And you had to go over what's called a dreaded mirror search. And that was an excuse as well. That was an excuse to beat you. You were kicked about because, I mean, there was nothing there of any significance. We were locked up 24/7. We weren't going anywhere. We were no threat. And yet, no, they carried out these humiliating, degrading searches. Again, they were simply designed not to find anything. They were designed to try and break us. And that went on for a number of years.
So could I ask you about when you decided to sit down and write about the book, remembering all these things, these quite traumatic events, obviously going through and reliving that all again and pitting it down. How did it feel? You must have been going to places that you hadn't been in a while when you start to actually put this story down into onto paper.
I mean, some of it just flowed, and it was all cathartic in a way as well. But some of it was really, really difficult, and even some of my feelings, and I felt it has to be authentic. You can't hide anything, and there was times where I didn't stand up, could have stood up, and didn't stand up, but I admitted it. And I said, because it's important that it's authentic, that it reflected reality. And I'm sure there was others as well who at times felt weak and overwhelmed, but we got over it. So I think my experience is very typical of the blanket men. And a lot of comrades have spoken to me and have said, that's it, you captured it, that's exactly how it is. And no doubt they relate to that as well. And I felt, yes, that was me. I felt that was the situation I was in. The most difficult part, without a doubt, was that very emotional period of the hunger strike, particularly with Joe McDonald. As I said, I was very close to him. We were a sail away. We came basically from the same area. And so we had a lot in common. We shared a lot. And it was difficult. It's, you know, particularly the last time I was with them, I'll never forget it, Ascension Thursday. And it was good because you get out to mass, it means you get out of cells. So I was with them. And I'll never forget whenever was talking to him about, Joe was very much into fashion. And he wanted a 3/4 length coat. And his daughter was going to America and was keeping on going about that. I said, she'll be okay now. Bernadette will, what do you say? She'll get you that 3/4 length coat, not be a bother. He was on hunger strike. He's on about 20 days, I would say, at that stage. And he said, I'll never wear it. I'll never forget that. I'll never wear it.
So if I can ask you a question about what kept you going, what kept you, did you have a goal in your head? How did you get through all this in your mind? How did you prepare your mind for all this dreadfulness that you had to go through? You were quite a young man at the time. As a matter of fact, I believe you were a late teenager in your early 20s. How did you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Did you, what was driving you to do all this? Your survival instinct would have kicked in, but your camaraderie with your friends. Tell us a little bit about, you know, how you were feeling at that time and where you thought you were going to end up.
Well, I would say it was the same for every single one of us. Bobby Sands summed it up in his poem. It's the thought that says, I'm right. And we were determined never to be criminalized. There was never going to happen. It could never have happened. And that's what kept us going. Obviously, the comradeship. And again, I write about the comradeship, and you'll read many books regarding the H blocks and how the comradeship held us together, kept us going. As I've said about Joe showed a lot of leadership. And when times were bad, particularly during those really bad wing shifts, people like Joe would stand up and would make little of whatever it is they threw at us. You know, I mean, his famous catchphrase was always, "There's going to be bad times for these good ones," and that always, that humor, that dark humor, always lifted everybody. Just realize, you know, you've done your worst. You've done your worst, and we're still here, and we're still feeling good, and we're still up singing, and we're still talking, and we're still banging doors, and we're still telling stories, and we're still moving on because we're not going to be defeated. So there was never any question about us ever giving in. Absolutely not. We were determined to get political status. Did I expect it to go on so long? No, most definitely not. I was thinking months. Initially, I was thinking months. But after a while, you start to adapt. Humans are very good at adapting to different situations. And when the protest was escalated to the no wash, no slop out, you think this is not going to last because, you know, there's going to be an epidemic here because of lack of hygiene and so on. It didn't happen. Again, because the human body can adapt to different situations. But you're always optimistic, always feeling that we're going to win eventually. We're going to win. And you have this sense of justice because we should win, because it's right. We're political prisoners. Everybody knows we're political prisoners. And, you know, we just refuse to be treated in any way different. So determination, not to have the Republican cause criminalized. The comradeship, it kept us going through the very worst of days. I mean, well, we obviously did have our bad days. There was times there whenever there was a lot of talk about, there was negotiations, there was possible solutions there, particularly during Cardinal O'Fake and Bishop Daly were dealing with Humphrey Atkins and Maggie Thatcher, and the talk was that we're going to get the close. And had we got the close, that could have been enough at that time for the solution. Certainly, when we're just going to accept close, we would have worked on it. We were always determined to get full political status, and which, of course, we did. We did get through time, but then, of course, Thatcher changed her mind on that and said it was civilian type close, and again was unacceptable. And that was a bit of a blow, because we felt we came very, very close to find a solution then. And then there was a period in between the hunger strikes. There was an opportunity there to resolve the situation. It was a question of interpretation of the document, and had they been interested in resolving the situation, the opportunity most definitely was there. But they felt that we were in a corner. They felt that we had played our last card. The hunger strike is gone. We're still in the same situation. You have achieved nothing. So they were totally intransigent. Not only totally intransigent, but Bobby Sands, who was negotiating and going back and forward, speaking to the governor, he was trying to treat him as a criminal. He said to Bobby, if you want to see me in future, says you come here wearing the prison uniform and you address me, the governor. We felt humiliated. We felt angry. We felt resentful. How dare they treat Bobby or any Republican prisoners like that? How dare they think that they could actually beat us? How dare they think that we were actually on our last legs? Absolutely no way, because the determination never shifted. We were always going to win. We were never giving in, and the anger really rose. And we knew then there's only one thing can happen here, and that's a hunger strike. And that's what happened. But the opportunities were there. The opportunities were there to resolve it. Had they give the close, there wouldn't have been a second hunger strike. Wouldn't have to go through that. But no, they felt they had us. And that's what happened. And how wrong they were.
I was going to ask you another question in reference to when you talked about, the demands of the prisoners at the time. Then, of course, the next thing we know, we're launched into the second hunger strike led by Bobby Sands. And could you just tell us the feeling in the jail time, and what was going on in your head, and how did it all progress? And well, we all know where it ended up, but tell us a wee bit about that part.
Well, I mean, as explained in the book, there was resentment, the way we were treated after the first hunger strike, when the chances are to resolve the situation. Second hunger strike was called. Bobby's going to lead it, and it was different strategy. This time, the hunger strikers would be staggered. So Bobby's the leader. Week later, Frank Hughes. Week later, Raymond and Patsy were on it. And then there was others who were waiting, had numbers waiting, should they die, to replace them. And that was the idea, because they didn't want the same situation as the first hunger strike. And plus, Bobby clearly knew that somebody would have to die this time, because they would have classed the first one as brinkmanship. And he led the hunger strike, so therefore he was prepared to die. And we had nothing but admiration for him. And we knew he was going to have to die. But what changed that was his election. Well, we thought it would have changed it. That was a big day for us. We'll never forget the people from Manor South Tyrone by that day. And we thought then that would save him. He's an MP now. But again, we misread the situation. We underestimated the Brits once again. And as you know, Bobby died. And Joe was to replace Bobby. Joe was number one. So he was to replace Bobby. And he was waiting and waiting. He couldn't understand why he wasn't going on it right away. And then Frank died. No, so, yes, Frank died. But Joe's concern was that possibly that there was a change of policy on our behalf, and we felt that, 4 hunger strikers was enough. Now, when we're going to speculate this time, all I can say was Joe was quite annoyed that he wasn't on the hunger strike right away. And there were rumours that the policy had changed and we're just going to leave it with 4 and they didn't want anybody else on it. And he was very upset. And he did say, this is our hunger strike. We have, along with 100 others, volunteered for this hunger strike because we know this is what it takes. And he also felt if he didn't go on it, that basically Frank Hughes, Raymond and Patsy would be allowed to die because Thatcher would think, okay, we only have to dig in here. There's 4 of them. And once that's gone, it's over. So in a matter of weeks then, the 4 of them will be gone and we'll be back to square one again. We'll have nothing to play with. Of course, that wasn't the case. And as you know, there was a conveyor belt of hunger strikes coming behind. And he felt that was really important in order to keep the pressure on the British to know that this is not going away soon and we're determined.
This is Bobby Sands?
Bobby Sands' policy, Bobby Sands, as in the staggering of the hunger strike.
Yeah.
Yes, well, I would imagine it was Bobby Sands along with others. There was a collective leadership. No, but the concern, it was speculation that was only going to be left at 4. I don't know how true that is. That's what Joe felt at the time. And he felt it was very wrong for those reasons because then the 4 lads would basically be sacrificed. But felt that, if they continue with the hunger strike, then the pressure stays. It's not going away for the British. So, as you know, the 3 lads did die, along with Bobby. And then we had Joe being the front runner then. There was talk of, once again, negotiations at the time that Joe was very close to death. I really don't know what happened. There was a lot of talk at that particular time. I've spoken to a number of people. I've spoken to Joe's wife, Greta, about that. Joe died very suddenly. Joe was a very, very strong, physically strong, as well as mentally strong individual. And I think he lasted 62 days. And, you would think the like of Joe McDonald would have been in the same category as Kieran Doherty, going to 70 plus days. I just get a sense sometimes that he died too soon, that negotiations were going on and they were involved in brinkmanship, the British, and they were hanging on, and then he just went. And then they just pulled back then because it was too late. I don't know, I'm only speculating, but that was the feeling at the time. Certainly Joe, it was a surprise for Joe, even though, I don't know exactly how hunger strike works. We were surprised that Joe died in, I think, 62 days, maybe 63. It seemed to have come very, very sudden.
So moving on, as the hunger strikers were dying and you're witnessing all this inside in jail, and as what emotions were going through your head at that time, this long, it was bad enough being in jail and experiencing all what was going on there, but the fact that this was a hunger strike and your comrades were dying literally within feet of you, coming to an end, how did you feel? What was your emotions at that time?
Well, very, very difficult for all of us in the blocks at that time and the wider Republican family. We had lost 10 comrades. I wouldn't say we didn't have anything to show for it, because we realized it wasn't just a case of political status. There was more to it than that. This was a head-to-head with the British government, the Republican movement and the British government. And while we lost 10 lads, we won. We didn't get political status there and then, but we won. Internationally, we won. Because the British government were shamed across the world. And people were asking, how come these 10 lads died?
Thanks for that, Jazz. One other, after the hunger strikers were over, after the hunger strikes had finished, and the period afterwards for a few years, what was it like in the prison? Was things calmer, and what was going to be coming next? I know there was within a couple of years there was a mass breakout at the jail. So tell us a little bit about that particular period afterwards.
Yes, without a doubt, it was calmer, but we never stopped pursuing our aims. We did it in a different fashion. We did it quietly. For example, we didn't come off the protest right away. It was too difficult, and basically the men wouldn't accept it. We didn't get our clothes. We didn't get our demands, all our demands. We did get our clothes, and that changed things dramatically. But we were still refusing to do prison work. And what happened was they set up what's called a task force. Men were selected to go into the conforming wings and basically get the loyalists to go on protest through various means. And what happened then was they were moved out of the blocks and they were put in non-conforming blocks, protesting blocks, which left just basically nationalist prisoners together. So we had segregation there. That got segregation. And because we had segregation, that gave us an opportunity to start planning for escapes. Now, I wasn't aware of the planning for escapes initially. In fact, I would say that period just before the hunger strike, 82, was the most difficult period of my time in jail, because 10 lads were dead. We didn't have political status. Yes, we had our own clothes, but I wanted more. And the talk was that we're going to burn the workshops, because people were still going to work. And it really grated me. It really, really annoyed me that men were still going to doing prison work after 10 men had died. And I still wanted our political status. Now, while they were down for doing work, they didn't do work. It was a complete joke. They were going to different workshops, and that was good for communication, for passing messages and other things and so on. So it was very good in that respect. But I still wanted the workshops burnt. I wanted the work gone completely. And I would have mentioned this to a few people. I was basically told it's good for communication. And relations changed dramatically with the prison officers as well. Men were helping them do crosswords, making them tea, chatting away to them as if they were best buddies. And that annoyed me as well. Now, I wasn't a bitter person, but given what had happened down through the years, and we're only freshly out of the situation of the blanket protest, it really, really annoyed me until the day somebody came in to me and said, listen, do you want to go and escape? And that changed everything. And I realized what was going on was we were conditioning the screws so as there would be no issues about getting through grills and them opening doors for us and so on, because that was an important, that the escape couldn't happen without that. So what actually was going on, unknown to me, was we were conditioning the screws so as we would have their own block, which we did. The escape took place. We held the block for over an hour, and some of those prison officers would have been responsible for brutalizing prisoners during that blanket era. We showed nothing but humanity towards them. We took their uniforms. We gave them blankets so as they would be covered up, unlike the way they treated us. And we tried as best we could to cater for their needs. It was very hot. They were giving them water and so on. And so there was no revenge. I'll have to say that was one of my proudest days, because I was really pleased to be part of a disciplined, sophisticated organization. And here we are, shortly after the hunger strikes. Here we are in control of this block. Here we are getting into the back of this lorry until we got the final gate. But as you know, 18 lads got clean away, and some of us unfortunately got caught.
So, asking the questions, one of the biggest prison breaks in Europe, well, probably the biggest. 38 got away, or 38 got out anyway, but some of them got caught, and you were one of them.
Yes. Well, what happened at the Tally Lodge was the screws. We hit the Tally Lodge, which is the last gate at the prison. Now, the prison's within a camp. The British Army's in the camp as well. So the last prison gate, what happened was it was just too much. We hit it at a bad time whenever the screws were changing. The screws going off duty and coming on duty, and you had about 40, 50 screws altogether. It was just, we're just overwhelmed. So we just basically had to abandon the grub lorry and we made a run for it across the fields, and there was no way I was running across those fields. There were sentry boxes, and the Brits were hanging out with rifles, and I was just, and the screws were shouting at them, shoot, 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 shoot them. And there was no way. I said that the lads are not getting over that barbed wire through his fields. And so I got a car along with 3 or 4 others. We got a car and away we went, and we thought we were going to escape. But then as we were coming out of the camp, the very last gate of the camp, the British Army man, the British soldier there slammed the gate, and we just rammed into it. And it was enough to wedge the gate open, and I bounced out right away.
Is that the famous photograph of the car jammed in the gate?
Yeah,
that's the car that you jammed in.
That's it.
And he's all bailed out of that and jumped over the bonnet.
Well, what actually happened was I bailed out of it. The windows were all smashed in. I went the front windscreen was smashed, so I jumped through the front windscreen, over the bonnet, and got out through that little gap in the gate. And I looked around, and they had surrounded the car, and I thought, I'm the only one escaping here. I'm the only one that's all on my shoulders, because I didn't believe the guys that were running across the fields had any chance whatsoever. So I run down the road. And
were you not concerned at the time that you could have been shot dead?
Well, they did shoot at me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the British soldier come after me, and he did fire a couple of shots at me. He did, yeah. Yes, I was concerned, but there was no way we were going to stop. We just kept running.
The prison officers couldn't run after you, but this young soldier just kept at you and kept coming for you.
Yeah,
he just ran for.
Yeah.
So basically, he chased you, and he was a better runner. Should I?
It wasn't a case he was a better runner, but I wouldn't take that away from him. He probably was a better runner. It was a case of me having to zigzag because he was shooting at me. So I'm zigzagging down the road, and I really wanted to run up Blair's, but there was too exposed with a sentry box there. So I saw that the bog road, they call it, and it was about 50, 60 meters down the road, maybe 100. And I said, if I can just get around the bog road, then I'm going to be safe. Might get caught, but at least I'm not going to die, because you can't shoot around corners. Mm-hmm. And I got around that corner, and it was leading me back into the camp.
So you basically sort of running a circle here?
Exactly, more or less, yeah. As I said, the shots dictated what way I ran. And I mean, I got into a field, but the field was upturned, and there was no way it was like quicksand. You just couldn't run through it, and it was just, there was no cover. And next thing, the Brits in on top of me with gun to my head, basically.
Were you completely exhausted?
Absolutely exhausted, and the adrenaline was pumping.
Yeah.
It was pumping. Yeah, it was pumping. I don't know why, but I still felt some success. The fact that, the operation, taking over the block and getting out the gate, even though it wasn't what I wanted, I still felt some success. Yeah, because then I did find out a lot of the lads at that time, I said about 21, got clean away.
Thanks very much for that, Jazz. Just in conclusion, from start to finish, when this all started out for you, you're sort of the cycle of life, if you're thinking in republicanism. Tell us a little about, at the end of the day, was it worth it?
Well, we didn't get the choice for a start. I mean, the situation wasn't of my making or anybody else within the Republican movement's making. I mean, we were born into a certain situation, and we made choices within that. I remember as a child in Somalikis, which is right next to Crumlin Road Jail, looking across to Crumlin Road Jail. And there I was a couple of years later in C-Wing, Crumlin Road Jail, looking across to Somalikis and hearing the bells and knowing I would have went to that class at such and such a time. And you're wondering, how did this all happen? It wasn't of my making. It wasn't of the Republican movement's making. It was a situation which we had to live within, and we made choices within that. And particularly the 10 lads, you know, if you asked, you know, it's difficult to say, is it worth it, given that 10 men died? I'm sure their families would have something different to say, because, and the many others who died. And I'm not even just talking about the Republican movement, I'm talking about all the people who died during the conflict. So, I mean, that's very difficult, and certainly it's not what you would have wanted. And I think it could have been avoided. I don't think we had choices at the time. I think we made the right choice, if that's what you're asking. I believe we were doing the right thing. The situation was completely different from what it was today. And we felt that we certainly did move the situation on. And as I said, particularly the hunger strike period, I think that was a great fillip for the Republican movement. It internationalized, as I said, the struggle. People admired the Republican movement. People started joining the Republican movement in their droves. And I really do believe that the successes of Sinn Féin today can, by and large, be brought back to those days of the hunger strike. So was it worth it? I would have much preferred if it didn't happen. But again, you don't get the choices. But it did move the situation on. And thankfully, we're in a better place today. And we're very strong today. It's not if there's going to be a Nederland, it's when there's going to be a Nederland. And that's where the momentum is. And I look back with pride on that period of the protests, of the hate blocks, and say to myself, the lads most definitely changed history. And I'm proud as well, as are my comrades, that we were part of that.
So the book, 6,000 Days, you can get it in any reputable bookshop, of course.
Well, you can get it on Amazon as well. You'll get it on Amazon. Yeah, 6,000 Days, Jim McCann, £13. And you'll get it at a number of stores as well. That's correct, yeah.
Okay, well, Jazz McCann, thank you very much for coming to the Sweet Stream.
Thank you.
More than welcome to come. Thank you very much to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.